should have worn a jacket.
The Weekend Review. We're here at the Oklahoman's video studio to talk about some of the stories that made headlines this week. Unrest in Missouri, a cop in court, big money coming to UCO. And 'tis the season for outrage. We'll get into all these topics over the next few minutes. Kelly Dyer, editor of the Oklahoman. Philip O'Connor, one of the biggest Royals fans I know, and business editor Don Mecoy. Guys, thanks for stopping in this morning.
Thanks.
You probably have an official title, which is enterprise editor or something, right? But off the heels of the World Series win, there's nothing wrong with being called a Royals fan, right?
I will take that.
Missouri State University its system made headlines earlier this week. Yesterday, they named a new interim president. It's Michael Middleton. He is an African-American who said he understood the complexity and the nuance of recent racially charged campus clashes, and he added, while some may hold race against him, it may be why he got the job as well. Earlier this week, we saw quite a bit of unrest in Missouri, and there was a journalism component to this, Kelly, right?
There was. There were some students who were walking together. It was like their right to peaceably assemble. And then there was a journalism student who was there to photograph the incident. And they gave him a really hard time. They tried to block him. They held their hands up. And he just kept trying and trying and trying to explain to them that the same First Amendment that allows you to be here allows me to be here. And he kept saying, it protects both of us. It protects both of us. And it was just so disturbing because a lot of the students kept saying to him, you don't have the right to be here. And he said, I'm trying to document it. I'm trying to document this for history. And some of the people just said, it's documented, it's documented. But what the media does is a more formal documentation of pulling information together, validating it, presenting it, packaging it, and giving it to the public. So he was just doing his job.
That student photographer is Tim Dyer. We're looking at footage right there. And at this point, he's facing fellow students, and they're saying, hey, move back. And he's like, I have a right to be here. In fact, that's what he says right there as I paraphrase him. Yeah, bring up the audio, guys, because we're looking at his conversation there with the mob. And Phil, we've seen this in a few places. We saw it in Ferguson for sure, but that was more of an adult police situation. This college campus definitely involves some access, right?
Absolutely. I mean, this is an issue that photographers in journalism face all the time, whether it's a crime scene or any kind of might be an auto accident. Oftentimes the first reaction of those who respond is to try to block our access to that. And what I think they fail to grasp sometimes is, like, number one, we have a right to be there. If it's public property, we have all the right to be there as much as anyone else. And number two, they lose the opportunity for us to document history, especially in a situation like at MU, where I mean, that is a landscape-changing event there that without the journalist being there to record it, to be able to look back on that, to have history recorded is important. I would just say to me, the most interesting part of that whole thing was that I'm more proud of anybody of the journalism student. I mean, I just think he could not have handled that situation any better. And the sad thing is the person that he's in conflict with is a mass communications professor who should know better.
The professor was Melissa Click. She was an assistant professor in the Department of Communications. She has since stepped aside and apologized. The student, again, is Tim Dyer. He accepted that apology and said, look, I never wanted to be the middle of this story or the story itself. But you're exactly right. He really had a calm demeanor and explained himself. Here's what I'm doing and here's why I need to be here. And why is that important, Kelly?
Well, and part of it is he was in a tough spot because the last thing a journalist wants to do is become part of the story. So he didn't want that to happen, but it was just so important that he was there and that he was, and that the other students needed to be listening to him as he was listening to them. So it's just important that we have access and that we stay on top of things. And
Concerned Student 1950, that was the group that started the protest, or they organized some of this, wanting their rights recognized. And initially they wanted coverage of their platform, their position, but then when this broke out, they were like, no, go away, let us peacefully assemble ourselves. It was almost like there was two things being said there.
Well, the media could have extended the reach of their message. And so it was really a contradiction there that, we're trying to make a statement, but don't cover us.
Well, it was the mass communications. It was Melissa Click is the very person who sent out the was I think a tweet that she was asking for help if anybody had any contacts in the national media that could help them get their story out. And then to see her turn around and do this, you know, a day later, it's kind of like, okay.
They needed a PR firm to handle the protest. One last thing on this, Kelly. I know you have a stance, if you will, on something you call vigilante. I'll let you give us a brief comment on that.
Okay, now I have to separate it from this topic because I'm more concerned about the process. That it's like, I love old cowboy shows, and when the mob...
Where is this going?
Okay.
She took us to the Wild West.
Okay, when the mob used to show up at Marshall Dillon's jail, demanding that he let the bad guy out, what did he say? He said, we are a civilized society. We have a system of justice that we need to respect. So my whole thing is, it's a little bit scary, the things that social media can do, because it can empower people, and you'll hear a lot of references to there's safety in numbers and there's power in numbers. My message is that there is responsibility in numbers too. So that's just a point that I've been making. I call them vigilantes because I think they can get stirred up just like the Old West mob of Marshall Dillon.
You got to be careful what you say these days, especially on social media, because it's out there forever.
That's right.
Kelly went El Reno on us. Oklahoma City police officer accused of rape, Daniel Holtzclaw. He's 28 years old. He's accused of assaulting 13 women between December 2013 and June of 2014 while a police officer. He's charged with 36 counts of bill, including 6 counts of first-degree rape. He denies the allegations, and this is something we've been covering all week as this trial goes on.
Right. So, I mean, we've had, I think, 3 victims have testified so far, all sort of sounding a similar theme of being pulled over by, or being approached by, or having some contact with Daniel Holtzclaw that ended in some sort of sexual assault. I think the big question in this case still for me is, I'm curious if he's going to ever take the stand. There are 13 victims who are scheduled to testify, I believe. The evidence is, doesn't look good, and the department moved quickly against him, and he's already been terminated from the department. So I think this could be possibly one of the blackest marks against the police department here in a long, long time.
Oklahoma City Police Chief Bill City said all the victims are black women between the ages of 34 and 58. The incidents occurred from February to June in an area of Lincoln Boulevard to Interstate 35 and Northeast 14th and Northeast 15th. He was arrested August 21st. It's just been interesting to hear some of the testimony from the alleged victims, the 13 accusers. And Scott Adams says he admits to coming in contact with these women, but denies anything sexual ever happened.
Right, and it exacerbates an already problematic relationship that the police department has with the minority community. And I think that's something that Chief City has tried to address. There's been forums about it or whatever. But there still seems to be a broad disconnect between the minority community and a lot of the police department. The numbers of minority police officers is still fairly low. He says that's the chief says that's a priority to try and get the force to more represent the community it serves. But right now, it's a big problem.
And Kelly, I'll defer to you in a second on our coverage on this. We have a strong story today. A third accuser in the sex crimes case told jurors yesterday, I didn't think anyone would believe me. I'm a black female. Strong toverage from the Oklahoman on this, but it also speaks to what Phil says, community relations there.
Well, I think, kudos to Chief City for being willing to talk about these things, because if you don't talk about things and address them and acknowledge things that have gone wrong, like with Holtzclaw, you won't move forward. So my hat's off to him for being willing to open and discuss these things.
Let me segue at this point into some of our weekend coverage coming up, and there you're looking at footage from Holtzclaw in the courts. And Phil, one of the stories you have coming up this weekend is by Matt Dinger. It's a ride along with the cops. Tell us about that.
Matt spent some time doing what police do and have done forever, and that's patrol the beat. And so he just wanted to have an opportunity to really spend some time with police in a squad car. And I believe what the end result was, it's 80% boredom and 20% terror. So be sure to pick up the paper on Sunday to find out at least what the 20%'s about.
Is that our headline?
Yeah, something along those lines.
20% terror.
Yeah, 20% terror. So
now, he didn't cuff and stuff anyone. He didn't put anybody in Marshall Dillon's jail, did he?
pick up the paper and find out.
At this point, I'll bring in Don Mecoy, business editor of the Oklahoman, and we'll stay on that topic. What do you guys have coming up this weekend?
Well, our Breonna Bailey has more on the efforts to reform Oklahoma's liquor laws, which are unusual, to say the least. And there was a move afoot in the legislature last year to do that. That effort got held over. It's going to come up again this coming session. She's looking at a poll. We've had an earlier poll that talked about some of the changes people would like to see. And you have a lot of people aligned in different areas here. You have retailers like grocery stores and places like Walmart. You have the package stores, the liquor stores that would like to see some changes too. And then you have the general public, which says, why can't we buy things the way they buy things in other states? But the poll that she's looking at this weekend is some people have concerns about changes in the liquor laws. They're worried that this could exacerbate a situation with drinking and driving, young people drinking. So she takes a good look at that.
Instead of the restricted entry to the package stores, right?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
She's done a nice job covering this. I know the package stores are concerned that some of the revenue will slip away if people can go to the grocery stores and buy it, but they also realize, hey, if that's what the public wants, then we have to adapt our business practices as well, right?
And and they want the opportunity to sell things besides stuff that comes in bottles, which they cannot do under the current laws. Right.
I'm curious if there's any empirical evidence of what they're claiming. I mean, it's not like we'd be the first state to take that approach.
Right.
You know, Mental Health Commissioner Terry White, she's adamantly opposed to it because she says there is evidence that expanding access can create more access for children and underage drinking. So she backs it up, and you know Terry, she's always got the numbers. So
well, and the poll that Breonna's
stance.
looking at shows precisely that. There's a fair number of people, significant number of people, who have concerns about that.
Stephanie Bias, I believe, was the state senator who was one of those behind this bill, so the story continues, right?
Right.
All right, now, moving on in business news, another story this week was UCO to receive a large donation from the founder of Paycom, and that's Chad Richardson, right?
Right. Chad Richardson founded Paycom here. He's a local success story. Founded this company. Initially, they're a technology company. They do online payroll. We do our online payroll here in this office through Paycom. They have since expanded into a lot of other areas. They help companies to do their compliance with ACA rules and all kinds of things. And the company has been growing like crazy. Last year, Paycom went public, so the early investors, including Chad Richardson, basically cashed in at that point. And now they're quite wealthy people. And Chad obviously wants to give back to the community. I haven't talked to him personally about this, but I know he's really interested in Oklahoma and Oklahoma City. He's building quite a company here. And he used to be on the wrestling team, I believe, at UCO, so he made a $10 million contribution, one of the biggest, if not the largest contribution UCO's ever had to the athletic department. And I wouldn't be surprised going forward if Chad Richardson doesn't become a bit of a local player in philanthropic efforts and other kinds of community efforts. He talked to us recently. Since their company went public last year, they appeared in our Oklahoma Inc. rankings that the Oklahoman does each year for the first time, and they were the #1 company, a publicly traded company in Oklahoma. And he talked about the fact that he wished there were more technology companies in Oklahoma City. So he has a lot of ideas, and he has a lot of concepts, and he has a lot of success. So it was a really interesting exclamation point to what's been an incredible year for Paycom. And anybody who bought their stock early on also is doing quite well because it has more than doubled since.
Kudos to them. We do have a clip from that. And Kelly, you actually used to work at UCO, right?
I did. I was the news bureau director at UCO. And, you know, it's been fun to watch that little university grow and blossom. I mean, we had President George Nye, followed by Roger Webb, and now President Don Betts. And it's just been nice to see it transform. I went there, well, a long time ago.
Just last week.
Right. I went to summer school there one time. And, you know, at that point they had a lot of rock parking lots, and it's just been wonderful to see it transform into the beautiful campus it is now, and quite a centerpiece for Edmond as well. So a gift like that can really be transforming. So
we're looking at a clip there. Joel Mueller, he's the UCO athletic director, but Chad Richardson, he came to UCO in 1989. He was a student athlete, as Don mentioned. He was a native of Tuttle, graduated from UCO with a degree in mass communications and journalism, guys.
That's right.
Hey.
He says there's no money in it.
Well, it worked out for Chad,
Yeah.
$10 million.
Yeah. Well, I've sat down with the guy before, Chad, and visited with him, and he has a great heart and compassion. And I'm excited that he loves Oklahoma City, and this is his home.
Speaking of heart and compassion, 'tis the season for outrage. Starbucks, the Red Cup, fired everybody up earlier this week. Apparently, and here's the deal. So social media, all of a sudden people are tweeting and on Facebook. They're outraged at what you see right there. It's the plain Red Cup with the Starbucks logo. And all the headlines you saw were about how they were outraged at this. Yet there was no context to who's outraged. You know, it's like, wait a minute, we're fired up about what? Well, I guess there was a minister from Arizona, an evangelist, Joshua Feuerstein, who posted some Facebook video that was viewed millions of times, and he was railing against Planned Parenthood and abortion and stuff like that, and it really was just a firestorm. Getting back to the vigilantes, it's interesting what we get fired up about these days, right?
It really is.
He's a professional agitator. I mean, and he got people agitated about this. I mean, this started flooding my Facebook feed
It's ridiculous,
during the
right?
week. And most of the comments that I saw, at least on my feed, were people saying, well, who's really outraged about this?
Right.
And it all went back to him. It went back to one guy who's really good at creating viral content. And it went viral, and it was all over the place. And when you look back at it, Starbucks has never had Christian symbols on their Christmas cups. They've had snowflakes and reindeer and Santa's sleigh.
Right.
But he also claimed that you can't get anybody in Starbucks to say Merry Christmas. So he told them when they asked him, what's the name that we should put on your cup? He said, my name's Merry Christmas. So when his order was ready, they would have to say Merry Christmas. Well, the most popular product in the holiday season for Starbucks is a bag of coffee beans that's called Christmas Blend. So I think it was a little bit of false outrage, but it garnered a lot of attention, and another sort of professional agitator, Donald Trump, picked up on it. When it just seemed like it was starting to die down, he said, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe we should
If I was
be
president,
boycotting
everybody
Starbucks.
would say Merry Christmas.
Yeah, so
It would be huge.
it shows the power of social media to
It
get
does.
things ginned up that sometimes aren't even things.
I'm just outraged how expensive coffee can be.
I was in Starbucks this morning and I said, have you guys gotten a lot of pushback about this cup? And they kind of laughed and they said, no, none at all. And they said, besides, the guy saying, go to Starbucks and have them write Merry Christmas on your cup. And she's like, yeah, we'll take the business. So it was kind of odd.
And there's Dunkin' Donuts' response, the Joy Cup they threw out there, which is good timing on their part.
I don't know Joy.
It's not claiming it. Don, back to you from a business standpoint. Target faced some outrage this week. The OCD, obsessive compulsive, I forget what the other word is. Basically
Disorder.
shopping, no, but not in this case. This was desire to shop or something. Bloomingdale's had an ad. These days, getting back to the digital ante, that can really affect business when they throw something out there from a marketing and it just takes off, whether they intended it that way or not, right?
It does, and we see this happen more and more frequently because everybody is into digital marketing, and you've got to be fast and you've got to go for viral, and if you do it right, it's great. But you sometimes are playing along the edges there. And that particular ad, which I think was sort of in a joking way advocating spiking your date's drink, is that the thing we're talking about?
Yeah, well, they're looking away, put something in the eggnog.
Yeah,
or
put something in the eggnog, and they, when there was this immediate pushback, there was an immediate apology.
Yeah, that's right, they did.
Which is the way these things happen now. It's very accelerated because of social media. You got to be out there. I mean, you see some incredibly clever stuff that really pays off.
Right.
But you also
So does
see
the immediate apology. We've seen that before
Yes.
too. That sometimes the best way is just to immediately diffuse it.
I think that's
It's
one
easy
thing
to
that
misstep.
Yeah,
It is.
I think that's one thing social media has taught businesses is that you don't delay. You immediately apologize, you withdraw it, and you try to make it a one-day story. And I think that's probably a good example of that.
Target's red and green holiday sweaters had the phrase OCD, obsessive Christmas disorder. That's what I was trying to say.
okay.
Some people
Okay.
from the mental side are like, don't even
Don't-
make fun of that. So
don't make
again, one of those
light of it.
borderline things that, hey, that's funny, maybe not.
Yeah.
Kelly Dyer Fry,
Interesting.
Philip O'Connor, and Don Mecoy. These stories that we mentioned can be found in upcoming editions of the Oklahoman, coverage online at newsok.com, and of course continuing coverage of Holtzclaw and some other things. Guys, thanks so much. Enjoyed the conversation. We will try to do this every Friday.
Great. Thanks, Dave.
Great weekend, guys.